Hello everybody, this is Erik Schultz, and I am with Dan Nealon, our new co-host for the semester. No, the studio at WIC Radio did not get an amazing renovation and become a lot bigger. We are in an undisclosed location. We don't want anyone to know where we live, but anyway, we are in a lounge, we'll say, in an apartment building, near our apartment building on campus, so if you know, you know, but yeah, so Dan, obviously we have the extended weekend, so Dan's going to visit some family nearby, so this is obviously recorded ahead of time, so we're not going to talk about any time-pressing matters necessarily, but one thing that we started, and this kind of leads into several of the main topics we're going to do anyway, and that is we took in questions from you, the listeners, the viewers, the fans of the show, of Wake, and of sports in general. So the first thing we really want to talk about, Dan, is this brand new pitching lab. And then with that, we have a question from Meg, and she says, where does Wake baseball stand among the other ACC teams? So, I mean, I think definitely the pitching lab kind of contributes to where Wake stands among ACC teams in terms of the advantage of recruiting, in terms of the advantage in developing pitchers and allowing pitchers to stay healthier and move more efficiently. But Dan, you're part of the analytics club and helping with baseball with that. But essentially, if you haven't seen the video, and by the time that this is out, there should be our video that is out of my footage too. But the pitching lab is something that really records the motion, the velocity, the rotations, and so many other amazing, valuable statistics for pitchers. And with that, there are sensors all over the body. There's a sensor under and around the mound, which is kind of crazy too. And then coming from the ceiling, there are a bunch of sensors around the mound. So it provides a lot of cool information. Wouldn't you say so?
Yeah, no, definitely, especially with our team that we've created. We know this information is going to be super valuable to just coming up with shifts and how pitchers, their pretty much their locations that they aim for, the rotations like you mentioned. Another big important aspect of this, the cameras and stuff, they pick up the spin axis, which when you're trying to develop your curveballs, your sliders, your knuckleballs, all those, the kind of the junk pitches, really helps figure out which ones are going to be really effective and which ones the hitters have real trouble picking up. So it's really cool information, and I was actually talking to a Blue Jay scout, and he was saying that only UNC and Duke, they can argue, are probably the closest to us in relation to our new pitching facility and the technology we have. And UNC, as we know, started it at the college level. So they have about 30 or 40 students who are on their analytics team, which is unbelievable. And then Duke, he mentioned, has similar technology now that we have. So he argued they might be a little ahead of us because they've had it for longer. It's not to the same level as our new lab is, which is great.
Yeah, this technology is really one of a kind in the sense that one thing that a lot of the coaches discussed with us is that there are other pitching labs out there. There's a notable one in Birmingham, Alabama, actually. So that's one thing you can do in Birmingham if you have a lot of free time, because there's not much else. And then there's others, I think there's some in Florida and California too, but none are necessarily done with the same motivation that this one is. So many of these labs are figuring out how a guy can throw a ball the hardest, how his velocity can go up. This is so much about not only that, but making sure that you are healthy, making sure you have the most efficient motion or stretch possible. But just kind of going off of what you said about that Blue Jay scout, I talked with also Dr. Brian Waterman, who's a team doctor and I believe he's an orthopedic surgeon at Wake Forest Baptist Health, a really intelligent gentleman. And he told me that he himself has worked with professional baseball teams. One team he mentioned, the Chicago White Sox. And this pitching lab is at the level of quite a few major league teams too, which is really impressive. And I know one thing that Ron Woolman, the athletic director, said is this is not just for Wake Forest pitchers. So much of it is about developing talent. It's for pitchers in the community, from preteen to teenage and high school pitchers. And some pitchers, not necessarily the competition, so don't think it's an invitation for other ACC schools, but other even college students in the area have the opportunity to experience this. And with that, sorry.
It's good. And along with that, another cool aspect of it is not only in the pitching lab, but the cameras that are above the mound, as we saw, really high tech. You can actually take those off and bring them outside, set them up on tripods, and analyze the hitter's swings and how long their bat's in the zone, and pretty much the plane that they're striking the ball at. So it's not only for the pitchers, like you mentioned,
Yes.
it can also be used outside on the field for the batters, which is another great aspect of this very expensive high-tech lab that they've created.
Yeah, but like you said, there was scouts from the Blue Jays. I also saw they were doing interviews, scouts from the Yankees, the Braves, the Rays, and the Tigers. And so yeah, that's definitely something really interesting. And talking about really the value of it, not only from the current athletes and being able to develop the pitchers and even the hitters we have here, it is such an amazing recruiting tool. So much about college sports, obviously that's a lot different from professional sports, is the recruiting aspect. A small school like Wake Forest has traditionally been at a disadvantage, but I think so much of what we've seen from some of the new coaches, including Coach Clausen, Coach Walter for baseball, he's been here a while, but they've been able to recruit with the idea of making you a better person as an entire whole, but now also they have the facilities to back it up of you'll be a smarter person, you'll be a person that understands the importance of service, which is something Coach Walter and Coach Clausen emphasize a lot, but you also will be a better athlete, and that definitely helps this pitching lab. Because Morgan McSweeney told us, he said, one thing that helped me pick committing to Wake Forest is that when I was being recruited, I just saw the pictures, the renderings of what this lab would look like, and it really sold it to me. So this is definitely something that is very exciting. So I guess with that, we kind of talked about where Wake Forest baseball stands among other ACC schools in terms of technology-wise, but I guess with this and with the roster, where does Wake Forest stand, I guess overall as a whole, compared to the other ACC teams?
Wake are picked 20th to go.
20th in the entire country.
And that's prior to this lab being built and letting them have, it's beginning of January for opening days in about a month.
Mm-hmm.
So the pitchers will have, 2, 3, 4 bullpens a week maybe. So you're talking double-digit times these pitchers are going to be able to go into this lab and get data from them throwing. So you add that up with the talent the team has, and the ACC is a strong conference again this year like it's been in the past. So it's going to be hard to fight for that one spot, but you definitely have to say they're right up at the top for this season.
Absolutely. I'm the one that loves analytics, but also just looking at the roster, that's one thing that a lot of people were curious about. Just 2 years ago when they went to that super regional, you had Stuart Fairchild, you had Gavin Sheets, you had Connor Johnstone, Parker Dunshee. That was an insane class. And so much of last year, there's the expression with some of the teams, we don't rebuild, we reload. But a lot of that was a development year. Unfortunately, it was because some players were suspended. And there were some young guys there. They lacked kind of a middle-of-the-week starter and a bullpen. But I was talking with Chris Lanzilli today, and he said, this team's different, and I absolutely agree. This is a team that has experience. They have a better bullpen now. They have the opportunity to have a really solid middle-of-the-week starter, and even with the departure of Griffin Roberts to the MLB draft, they do have a solid pitching rotation with Colin Palouse and Morgan McSweeney, really your 1 and 2 guys. So I think this is a really solid roster. I think, because this is one thing that you asked me, I think it was when we did the podcast, we weren't recording, but really where I thought or what the potential could be. And I think there is the potential for Wake Forest to again host a regional in Winston-Salem.
Yeah, you'd have to say, especially when you get to the regionals and they do the best of 3 series and stuff, you really do need 3 fantastic starters to make a good run in the postseason for college baseball. So I think the biggest question over the season is, can they establish that midweek, that number 3 starter? And from what we saw yesterday, it's the lab and the pitchers throwing. They have a couple of guys who maybe with a little bit more development, a little bit more control, could really turn into something very solid as a 3. Look at someone like Carter Bach, who, big lefty, he's got the perfect delivery to be a very deceptive lefty, hard to hit. But if he can just get his control a little better, he's looking to be a really solid 3 guy in that rotation. And being able to have 2 righties and Colin and Morgan, and then toss in a lefty the size of Carter, that'd be a really intimidating team to go up against in the postseason. And I'm not sure anyone would want to go up against that.
Absolutely. And I think one thing with that, even with as much data as we have, a lot of times it's hard to really replicate those in-game situations. So I think throwing some of these names that you've said in those middle of the week games, where at the start of the year it won't necessarily matter. It does matter, but it's not, the stakes aren't as incredibly high against some non-conference opponents middle of the week. Where as long as you have a guy like Carter that gives you an opportunity to win, keeps you in the game, I think it will be great development. I think it will be great experience. And then once we get to conference play, you get your Florida States, your Louisvilles, your UNCs that you're playing. You'll hopefully have a clear definitive. But I think the sky's the limit for this baseball team. I think Coach Walter has a really exciting program. He's got the analytics. He's got, obviously, I think, a great coaching staff. And I think one thing that's really important also is that Coach Walter's really emphasizing the player strength as a whole, not just physically, but emphasizing really having a strong mental health and mental game too. So that's really exciting. So moving on, question number 2. We have a question from Ned H. And he asked, what are your thoughts on the 2019 Wake Forest football schedule and projections for win-loss records? So for those of you that don't know, I'll read it real quick, but you can look online too. The full schedule was released. We knew non-conference, and we knew the ACC teams for the most part. We just didn't know the order. So, Utah State is a Friday game that we'll start with. Then we'll go to Rice. We'll have a non-conference. We're still in the ACC. I don't want anyone to get scared. A lot of people are confused about that. But it's listed as a non-conference Thursday game at home against UNC. Another home game against Elon. Then at Boston College, a bye week. Home against Louisville, home against Florida State, a bye week, home against NC State, at Virginia Tech, at Clemson, home against Duke, and then at Syracuse. So when you first saw this schedule all written out, what were your initial thoughts, Stan?
I think the teams we got at home were all very winnable games,
yes,
which can be nice because you have the home field advantage, and if you win those games and you win the majority of your non-conference, you are already in a bowl game. So that's nice if we're just trying to hit a bowl game, but I think we both agree this team is better than just getting that 6-6 just to get into a bowl game. So my first thoughts would be at Clemson, that's going to be a hard game to win. So I'm glad it's on the road because home, chances of us winning that anyway are probably a little slim. So having an extra home game could be really valuable for getting to that 7-5, 8-4 record we think. Another note that we both saw, that you pointed out, was that in the non-league, you have at Rice, and 5 days later,
you have to play
UNC. So there's a really short turnaround, and as we know with football players, that's not always a good thing. So 5 days is really short rest. But other than that, I think the bye weeks come at pretty good times. We have, 5 games in a row after our last bye week, so that could be a hectic time. Hopefully injuries don't hit. But you're looking home against Louisville, home against Florida State, home against NC State, and home against Duke in conference, and all those are very winnable.
I just want to say, thank God we finally aren't playing Notre Dame as a non-conference game, especially, I get it, they got annihilated in the playoff game, but they're still a good football team. So it's really annoying that, obviously they were great teams, but teams like Alabama, teams like Clemson, obviously they were the best. But a lot of times they have non-conference games that they can just kind of ease by, and we were playing Notre Dame as one of those games. But I think one thing I know Coach Clausen, my flashlight's on, one thing I know Coach Clausen absolutely can't stand is the short week games. So I think that will be a challenge. I think both those games are winnable. I think we will win both games, but I definitely think that presents the challenge because so much, especially this past season, with so many injuries, it was about really taking advantage of every minute possible for recovery, every minute possible for practice for the next man up. So it'll be interesting to see that. Obviously, we're hoping for a healthier season. That was really an anomaly in all of this. Coach Clausen said he never, in all his years of coaching, never had a year with injuries like this past season. But I think non-conference games, I hope and I'm confident that that can be a straight 4-0. I think the games that are really going to be crucial, I think Boston College, I think Florida State, and I think Syracuse, of games that I feel could go either way. Boston College, people don't realize A.J. Dillon's still going to be back. He was only a sophomore. That man is powerful. The biggest problem that we had against them last time, and the biggest problem that we had against a lot of teams up until really the final few games when things got locked down, like against Duke and then obviously the bowl game, was limiting explosive runs. And A.J. Dillon's a man, he is a grown man that will truck you, run you over, and march into the end zone. So I think it's really important that the team is prepared for that. Obviously, they try to be as prepared as possible, but hopefully with a healthy team and a stronger team, that game can be competitive and obviously even more competitive and go the other way compared to what it was last year. Florida State is it's traditionally such a powerhouse. This was the first season in like 26 years or something crazy like that. They didn't make a bowl game. They lost Jimbo Fisher. So this is such a big rebuild in my eyes compared to what Florida State's traditionally known as. Their recruiting class is 13th in the country, which is, if you told me Wake Forest had the 13th best class in the country, I'd be ecstatic. But for Florida State, that's not up to their standards. They're used to being in the top 10, the top 5 even. So I think this is a team that we still have the opportunity to win against. I think Florida State will be better than last year. I think they have the opportunity to make a bowl. But I think especially at home, this is a game we have the opportunity to win. And then Syracuse at the road, really to end the season, I think could be really interesting. They had a lot of seniors graduate, but at the same time they have a lot of juniors coming up. My biggest question is they had a redshirt freshman quarterback behind Erik Dungy, who in my opinion was absolutely robbed of ACC first-team quarterback. But Dungy, he was another grown man. He was a redshirt senior quarterback. He could throw down the field. He was definitely very mobile and athletic, and he could truck you too. So I think really depending on how Syracuse develops, how they take that next step, now that they're losing their veteran quarterback, kind of like what we did last year, will really determine that. So with all that said, I think there's the opportunity for us to go 7-5 or 8-4. And I think, I listed 3 games that could go either way. I think those 3 games will be, 2 of those will be the deciding factor, we'll say, in our record.
Yeah, I'd say out of those 3, I'd say we win one of those 3 next year. And winning one of those 3, I think, puts us to 8-4, which is a very good season. So another big game will be that Utah State one. Like we said, they were good last year.
11-2.
That's the opening game, so you never know how the team comes out of the gates. I mean, so that one, you hope they win. Home game, that's nice. So if you win that and you win one of those 3 big bubble games, you almost call them, you go 8-4. That's a very solid season.
It's fair to say that. I know so many people kind of laugh at that, but I think at this point it's fair to say that Coach Clausen, I think, is a great mind, as we talked about in our kind of winter break podcast. But Utah State, it's an interesting team because they were 11-2. I'm pretty sure they won their bowl. But it just comes down to level of competition too. They lost to all the ranked opponents they faced. I think one of them was Michigan. It'll be interesting to see, like you said, how they come out the gate and how they fare against ACC competition.
Yeah, I mean, there's no guarantee they're going to perform to an 11-2 kind of team, considering, like you said, the 2 losses were against pretty much the only 2 meaningful teams they played, if you're going to try and compare us to them. So you'd assume that Utah State should be a win, but just that first game, you never know how it's really gonna. You never know really how your team's gonna gel together for your first real meaningful game. So that'd be my biggest question mark coming out of the gate.
I wouldn't be nervous if I was a Wake fan, but
if they lose it, then you're talking.
Well, then
a 6-6 season. So.
Well, yeah, I think if we're going into it, I wouldn't be nervous because I think you have 2 very competent quarterbacks.
Got that right.
Even though you lose Matt Colbert, you have Kate Carney, who rushed for 1,000 yards. Even though you lost Greg Dortch, you have most likely Nolan Gruel coming into that spot, a healthy Scotty Washington, Sage Surratt. I think going into that, you have to be confident. If you lose that game, I think you have to reevaluate some things. But I don't consider it, like so many people after we lost to Notre Dame thought that this past season was a waste, down the drain, and it clearly wasn't. So I think, even if you lose that first game, I think they show the opportunity to go 7-5.
Yeah, I just worry the first game kind of sets your tone for the season. So I agree with you. I think we'll win it. I don't think we'll have an issue, but just that first game, I never bet on the first game of the season, and then if it doesn't go right, I would be a little concerned.
So you're ready to put what the score will be?
No.
No, I'm kidding. That's incredibly too early. They still there's not even a spring camp yet. So, but yeah, I'm looking forward to it. The countdown to August 30th is already started. It's going to be exciting to see the Jeeks out there again, and I think continue every year. It's now taking the next step, and I think this year they'll continue to do that. At least stay on the step, but I think they'll take another step up.
Yeah, August 30th will definitely be fun, and we learn who our starting quarterback is for the year as well. So, August 30th, good day.
Yeah. We'll be seniors, so it's kind of scary. But anyway, so Wake Forest basketball has continued in the trend this year, and that is beating 17th ranked NC State in basketball. What I mean by that is in the 2018-2019 athletic year, Wake Forest is now 5-1 against NC State teams head-to-head, and that includes 4 top 25 victories, and that's football, soccer, and now basketball. So definitely really exciting. Really, Jalen Horde, one thing that both you and I both discussed after the game, his first half was horrible.
Terrible. Worst, probably the worst we've seen him play this year.
Yes, and then the second half, he was really able to come alive. When the first half, everyone else was playing great. The second half, when we were slumping, he was the only one playing well. He had finished with a double-double. Really, as close as that game got, he's the one that kept us in it and gave us the opportunity to win. Along with that, Torrey Johnson made quite a few big shots too towards the end of that game.
Yeah, and free throws as well.
Free throws.
I mean, free throws win games, and he stepped up in the 1-on-1s and he knocked them down, which was big. And that's why you get a graduate transfer. I mean, that's what he was brought in to do, and he hasn't had the best year so far. I'd say he hasn't lived up to the expectations of kind of what we were expecting, considering we're basically a senior-list team. But it was really good to see him step up. Question, do you think Jalen Horde having a bad first half means anything to the fact that the team had a good first half?
I don't know. I think that's kind of like, and this isn't like anything against you, but I think this is kind of like, I don't really appreciate that question. And it's not in a mean way. I don't want you to think that, but it's just like, you obviously want everyone on your team to do well.
Yeah.
I mean, I think maybe the love was going around a little more.
Yeah, that's what it would be, because we know he takes a lot of shots, because he is our go-to player.
Yeah, I mean, I probably, my approach to that answer probably wasn't the best, but I think you look at the fact that he's the number one guy. The number one guy is not hot, spread the love around. I see where you're going with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically the fact that, I mean, he's been our go-to scorer, leading scorer of the team, double-double machine pretty much. He's the rebounder. So he's just really versatile, and it was weird that the best period of play that this team has had, you could probably say throughout the whole season. Honestly,
yeah, considering the level of competition.
Yeah, it was when he was pretty much non-existent. And he had, like we said, he had a terrible first half, and everybody else really stepped up.
Are you starting to bench Jalen Horton?
Yeah, let's bench our 4.5-star recruit that we got.
But yeah, another thing that I think is really important, because the issue was last year, it's still kind of an issue this year. It's not the number one issue, though, is guards getting rebounds. And Brandon Childress, who I'll just say I'm taller than, I have an inch on him. I'm 6'1". He got 9 rebounds, and that's one thing that I think is really important. That's one thing that Coach Manning acknowledged too, is that it's really important for guards to get rebound. And I think really in crunch time with those clutch moments, or NC State was really fighting for the basketball. I think it was really meaningful. I think it showed us really enough passion for Brandon to go in there and get that.
Yeah, Childress is undoubtedly our clutch player. He comes up with the big plays. I mean, he's the one who's got the level head for the most part, and I think that's a lot of why we had those issues last year with the chemistry of the team, because Childress he wants that big time shot, and he wants to be the one kind of in the headlines the next day, and he's definitely capable of it. But you have, like what we said last year with Keyshawn,
and Brian,
like
and Mitchell Wilbekin.
Oh, I forgot about him too. But it was good to see them. It's also important to note for this game though that NC State was playing without their best player, Markel Johnson, who they're saying he's probably going to be a first-round pick if he goes this year. So, and considering he's their go-to guy, in the beginning there was just no life to the team. It's almost like they expected to come out and lose. And I think the team probably knew, because they're a pretty experienced team, that they don't usually play pretty well down in Winston-Salem.
No, so, they don't do well at anything here.
Yeah, so you take away your best player when the line is already single digits. I'm sure there was probably a little shakiness in the locker room, but Torn Dorn was good for NC State.
Yes.
I mean, they had a couple good players. still, and we still put a pretty good performance, blowing a 22-point lead. Probably we shouldn't mention, but
It
still pulled
happened.
it out. So do you think this is going to continue?
Not consistently.
Yeah.
Because that was, yeah. I think Wake really, what helped them win was that they were able to play long. What I mean by that is, so much of what the big hype was, with your Jalen Horde being a tall, versatile player, what you see with Olivier Sarr, who may not be the tall center, but one that has occasionally gone outside of the paint to take shots. What you've seen with Shawnee Brown, maybe playing into the 2 or maybe some of the 3 spot, is a team with some height for the most part, going out and playing athletically, with using their large wingspans to go out and swap balls, play aggressively, keep their hands up on the defensive side of the ball, and then with that on the offensive side of the ball, make smart passes, let plays develop, and not just letting one guy do it and one guy just dribble out. There were occasional times in the game against NC State where you saw a couple of those moments, but I think that's what it takes to consistently do it, and that's play long. Use your arms, use your height to your advantage. You may not be the strongest considering it's a young team, but you have something that cannot be taught, and that's height. That's wingspan. You can't hit the gym and your arms get longer. So I think that's what it will take for Wake to compete against ACC teams. They competed against Duke in the first half, and when this airs, they will have played another game, and we'll see if they competed. It's against Miami, right?
Or the next game?
Yeah.
Virginia Tech.
Virginia Tech.
At Virginia Tech this weekend, at Virginia next week.
Okay.
We have to say, I mean, this is almost a bad time to get a little bit of momentum, in my opinion. I mean, I guess at Virginia Tech, maybe you might be able to squeak something out, but I mean, they're ranked 9th right now. They did get smoked midweek by Virginia, so maybe they'll drop next Monday. But you're playing the 9th overall team at their place, and I don't know, we're not notorious for showing up.
Yeah, I honestly would not project the next 2 games to be wins, but I think this can be a motivating factor to a certain degree, even for further along games. The next home game, you can definitely use that as a coach, as a lesson in locker room talk of, last time we were in our house, we didn't let the 17th team walk out here with a win. Now against, whoever the next home game is, we can't let them do that either.
Boston College.
College.
So that's a very winnable game. I just hope these next 2 games we keep building on what we had, and like you said, stretching the floor. It'd be very nice to see Sarr start hitting some of those mid-range 3-point shots that he likes to take, because if you can get a stretch 5 in there with the athleticism we have.
It's dangerous.
We're a very athletic team. It's kind of underrated because we haven't been able to put that into the performances, but we're very athletic. So you get Childress out there, who's a good defender, so he can guard the point guard. Another player who I think is super underrated, Shawnee Brown.
Oh, I love Shawnee.
He's great. I mean, but again, he hasn't had the best year to his level, but he's been our best 3-point shooter.
Yeah.
Which is something he worked on a lot in the offseason.
One thing that's underrated about Shawnee is his defense. Last year, once ACC conference play started, he was the best defender on our team. And that's saying something.
Yeah, no, he's definitely worked towards becoming that 3-and-D kind of textbook label that you get in the NBA. Guy who shoots above 40% from the 3 and just lock down defense, and he's great. He can switch. He can guard anywhere from the 2 to the 4 because he's a big, quick guy. I mean, he's built. So, but guarding the 4, he's a little undersized, but if he fronts the post, I mean, he can handle that. Another one of the freshmen who I don't think gets enough credit because, like Sarr, he hasn't really put it all together on the court yet. Isaiah Muncius.
He had a couple good games in non-conference play.
He is a freak athlete. Like he can guard from anywhere from 2 to the 5. He's a big kid, and you see he has the confidence in himself because he missed, I think, 3 or 4 3-pointers during NC State game, and every time he got the ball, he was looking to shoot, which kind of sounds like a negative thing in a guy who's not making a lot of shots. Yeah, you don't shoot that if you don't think you can make it, and if a guy his size and with his athleticism can start hitting some threes, that would be great for this team. Another great bench weapon. I mean, that's all. I feel like we're just one piece away from being competitive in every game we play.
Yes, I agree. So, with that, this is something that has been, that I'll say, the big media, because we're technically media, but the big media, though, has been fixated on for a long time, and that is Kyler Murray, Heisman winning quarterback, first round MLB pick. He has $5 million with the A's and a few years in minor leagues at the shortest, really. And then he perhaps could have up to $15 million in the NFL as a potential first-round pick. So I know you said to me earlier that you think football is the best option for him. I will say I really don't care. I think we talk about money, we talk about risk, and we'll address that in this segment too. But so we just need to say, let the man do what he wants. At this point, he's a great athlete. If he wants to play baseball, let him do it. Let him work his way up. Eventually, if he feels he's good enough, and if he is good enough, and I think he can, he'll make that money. It'll take a little longer, but he'll make that money. If he wants to play football, let him have the risk of injury, I'll say, because he'll make a lot of money. And there's so many rules on really coming at the quarterback that the risk is a little more minimal compared to what it was really in decades previous. But I think we need to focus on this man's happiness because he definitely wants to do both. It's just what he loves the most.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely right. Let him do what he wants. But I don't know how many 20-year-olds you don't know, or you do know, that don't want money. I mean, because that is all these guys, and this might not be the case with him, I'm not sure, but you always hear these stories about these guys are from poor neighborhoods, and then they make their way up, and then they get the money, and then you see on their Instagram, oh, I bought my mom a car. Like, what we've been working for, you know? And if he wants the money, football, like we were comparing former first-round picks and what their whole contracts were worth, he's projected to go mid-first round, likely the second quarterback off the board. And this isn't a very deep quarterback draft, so being the second off the board might not actually mean that much, but he's going to get paid. I mean, he's looking to get at least $13 million, could be up to $20 million just from his first contract with football, and that's obviously a lot of money. I mean, not that $5 million isn't a lot of money, but he'd get that $5 million signing bonus for baseball, and he's going to be in the minor leagues for 2-3 years.
Yeah.
All the scouts say he has the potential.
He was drafted on the potential.
Solely on
athleticism.
Potential. In baseball, potential only gets you so far. Like, basketball in the NBA draft, you get drafted on potential, you're playing day one. Like, they don't send you down to the G League if you're a first-round draft pick who you picked on potential. Baseball, you got to work your way through the ranks.
It's a different animal.
Right, it completely is. So he's got 3 or 4 years in the minors not being in the spotlight versus you go to football and opening, like, first game next season, there's a good chance he's your starting quarterback.
Right. Yeah, I absolutely see where you're coming from. And that kind of comes from, when we talk about potential, that comes from the issue of risk on both sides of it. There's the issue of risk on baseball, the fact that he may never make it to a major league ballpark and be an everyday regular player, or even be a star. And then, like we kind of said, the risk isn't as high as it was back in the day when everyone was giving each other concussions every play, but there is still a substantially higher risk in the NFL of getting hurt versus in Major League Baseball or minor league baseball. So there is the risk, I'll say, long-term stability in football, but then at the same time there's that risk of actual security in baseball. So I think it can go either way, but ultimately, like we said, we kind of started with our main point, which accidentally we'll say, let's let the man do what he wants.
Let him do what he wants.
Let him do what he wants. I think one thing that I want to say, and this is coming from someone where baseball is my favorite sport, I think the only reason that this argument, this debate is going on in Kyler Murray's head is because of how poor the baseball marketing system is. If they didn't have this issue with marketing their players, there wouldn't be this problem. I think Kyler Murray would be willing to bite the bullet for a few years and go. But the fact that last season they said that it's up to Mike Trout to market himself. It's up to whoever to market themselves. It's not up to the league. I think that's absolutely foolish because the NBA, really the biggest sports league or association right now, is a player-based league.
Oh, absolutely.
Player-based league. And I think there's a fundamental difference between basketball and then we'll say baseball and football, and that those two sports, baseball and football, are so much more tied regionally. It's more about identity of where you're from versus which players you like. So I think it's a little bit of a difference. But if you want to compete, especially in this era of social media, you need to market your players. MLB sent their marketing reps to that meeting with Kyler Murray and the Oakland A's. If I were Kyler Murray, I would say, why haven't you done this with Aaron Judge? Why haven't you done this with Mike Trout? Why haven't you done this with Javier Baez? You've got a ton of great young stars right now that they haven't been able to capitalize on. Kyler Murray, if he wanted to, and if MLB had the appropriate marketing in place, he can make a ton of money off of endorsements, even in Oakland. This is a guy that won a Heisman Trophy, took his team to the college football playoff, and now, if he makes it as an MLB player, how can you not sell that?
Oh, you should be able to sell it, but the issue is, like you said, MLB teams aren't really doing it for them, and you look at someone like Aaron Judge last year, who made $550,000. That's what he was paid from his contract in the league. So if his endorsements aren't going right, yeah, that signing bonus of $5 million is great, which is what Kyler Murray would get from the A's. But if that's all you got, and you're putting next 5-10 years into baseball, and you're not making endorsements because like every sports fan right now knows who Kyler Murray is. His name's been everywhere.
Yes.
Dual sport, going to be a first-round pick in football, was already in baseball. I mean, that's just unheard of these days. So he should have a very high marketing potential that is just never going to be touched.
Yeah, that's why I really don't care, but at the same time I can't blame him, because even though the NFL isn't doing as good of a job as the NBA, the NFL I think is doing a better job than MLB in marketing their players.
Yep.
And I think one thing that, as much as I love the tradition of baseball, I think baseball is different than the NFL and NBA in its history, and I think it's important to preserve it. I think it's important to celebrate that. But I think people confuse that with not being allowed to have fun. And I think, let them have fun. Let that be a marketable thing, especially with a new generation of players coming in.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you just said. For him, he's going to be doing what he wants, which sounds like it was football. And after the Heisman, it was reported that that's when he decided football is what he really wants, which you can't blame him for being the best college football player in the country to choose it. But for me, I just think he was going to follow the money no matter what. If he hadn't had that season like he did, the money would be less in football than baseball. And then I would agree with everything, the risk factor. I mean, maybe the endorsements still wouldn't be as high, but the fact that he can capitalize on his endorsements right now, I think football was always going to be the choice if you could have guaranteed him having the season he did.
Fair enough. Okay, so Deeks, Wake Forest has had 2 drafted in the MLS Super Draft this past, last week it was.
Last week.
We had Logan Gadula drafted 13th overall by FC Cincinnati, and then Brad Dunwell was in the 8th pick of the 3rd round with the Houston Dynamo. And then Sam Rabin has a homegrown contract with the Colorado Rapids. Dan knows a lot more about soccer than I do, so do you want to enlighten all of us on what this means?
So for Logan Gadula, I mean, he went to a very ideal situation. FC Cincinnati coming into the league this season. This is their expansion year. So they're the rookies in MLS, so they have a lot of opportunities to make it in their side right now. And of note, the fullback competition there is pretty shallow, so he has a good chance to make it. And Greg Garza, who they traded $500,000 for to get him from Atlanta, this is FC Cincinnati, he just had to pull out of U.S. men's national team January camp with an injury. So his season is uncertain right now.
Okay.
They're not sure if he's going to be back for the start of it, so that opens up another fullback position. And
Perfect for Logan.
You don't draft somebody 13th overall to only send them down to like your B team or your USL affiliate. And since FC Cincinnati's coming up, they're gonna need to make sure these players are a valuable part of their team because they have a lot of roster filling out to do. You don't have as big of a roster in the USL, which is the 2nd division, as you do when you're in MLS. So the draft choices that they made, they have plans for them. And they traded $150,000 to the Philadelphia Union for all of their draft picks.
Wow.
Which, that sounds kind of cheap if you're familiar with NBA or NFL draft, $150,000 for all of your draft picks.
Mm-hmm.
But in MLS, usually you only get 2, 3, 4 starters out of the whole draft. So it really isn't that valuable, but that just kind of tells you where their head is at. They're looking to make valuable roster decisions based on this draft, and the fact that they took him 13th overall, that's a big deal. You go to Brad Dunwell, whose stock really did drop at the Combine. Before the MLS Combine, which is pretty much the pre-draft workout, they were thinking he was going to be the first senior off the board, and that being said, there aren't that many seniors that go this late, but and he dropped. I mean, they were thinking maybe a second-round pick, and he dropped to a third-round pick. But Houston Dynamo, that's not a terrible situation. Brad is like a defensive midfielder, a traditional number 6 kind of player, and the teams are always looking for that. Like, defensive midfielders is hard to come by now because everyone just wants to be an attacker. So he's a very disciplined defender, and he's experienced, which is going to be his most valuable asset going into an MLS team. Is he doesn't have a ton of potential because he's already kind of become a player. So he's more ready to get slotted into a team, but the fact that he dropped so far, I think Houston Dynamo, they don't really have a need at defensive midfielder, but they just went with, let's take the best available player. So I'm not as hopeful about his chances for this upcoming season, but he might go to Dynamo 2, the second team of Dynamo, and could work his way up. I mean, he's going to show that he has the soccer knowledge.
Yeah, one thing with that, I think Brad has a lot of the intangibles necessary to be successful when his time comes. Beyond experience and knowledge, I think as his captain his senior year, along with Logan too, but he's definitely a great leader. One thing like that, I was able really to see his character even when I interviewed him last year. So I think great guy in terms of soccer IQ and being really a solid defender in the midfield too is definitely important. Could help him, maybe not this year like you said, but in the years to come.
And another really good thing for him is coming from this Wake Forest system. And we're known for producing MLS talent. There's, we can list off. There's a whole list. Michael
Parker is really the most
notable
notable right now.
I mean, even look at Jack Harrison, who's not in MLS anymore, but got bought from NYCFC to Manchester City last year, and now he's currently on loan at Leeds United, who are in first of the championship, and he's a starter. So he's another one who Coach Muse really is a great developer, and his system is possession-based, which MLS teams like to work towards. So you're getting these kids who have been in that system and you know what you're getting. So I think, like you said, he has these intangibles and he's just a very intelligent, very technically disciplined soccer player, and MLS teams kind of really like that. So you hope maybe a year or two of adjusting to the pace of play in MLS or USL with Houston Dynamo 2. And I hope the best for him. I hope I see him next season, but
absolutely,
it's very unlikely. It's not very likely that third-round draft picks make it very often. But with that being said, last year Wake Forest had a player drafted in third, fourth round by the Columbus Crew, and he ended up being a starter for a playoff game.
It matters how hard you work in the end, you know.
And coming from Wake Forest system with Coach Muse, I mean, you're put in a great position. So there's a very high chance that he succeeds as well.
So now Mr. Rabin with the homegrown contract.
Yeah, and this is another really interesting kind of MLS perk, is this homegrown aspect. So if you play in an affiliate of the Colorado Rapids as a youth player, so I think he joined their system when he was 12 or 13, so the homegrown, when you reach the age when you're ready to become a professional, it doesn't count on the salary cap, which is really, really limiting for MLS teams right now. So the fact that he's a homegrown player shows that they think a lot of him and that he's ready to contribute. Like, they really like him. They know what he's about because he's been in their system. He makes, higher than the draft picks do because it doesn't count against the salary cap, so there isn't really that limiting factor.
Right.
Like the Generation Adidas players do in the draft, which is a whole other aspect, and the top 10 players get them all because they want the top teams to play them. So he's kind of in that same category, and as a defender, he's really valuable because teams are always looking for defenders. And coming out of college, the players that traditionally make it are the defenders.
Yeah.
Because the attacking quality is very different, obviously, from college to pros, but the idea and the concepts are the same. So you don't really have to adjust to the pace of play as quickly because you've always just been reactionary. Like, you always just react to the pace of play. You adjust throughout the game. Meanwhile, the attackers are kind of setting the pace. So defenders traditionally can make it as a homegrown player. So he's also in a very good situation, I would say. I mean, they know him, they like him, and he's a defender coming from Wake Forest. So I like his chances in Colorado too, and they're currently under a roster rebuild after acquiring like Kellen Acosta last year. So they're looking to make a playoff push this season.
Okay.
And I hope by the end of the year, you might see him on the bench or something in the 18. I mean, I wouldn't expect him to be starting this year because he's still young as well. So we just hope maybe next year, the year after, he just slowly gets infiltrated into the the team. And maybe a bench player someday, maybe a starting center back in MLS. I'm sure he'd be cool with either of them.
I look forward to it. So now we have a question from Beth, and she wants to know who will be the opening day starter for the New York Yankees. And ultimately, I think it comes down to two, and I think we both agree with this. It comes down to really two finalists with this, and that's Luis Severino and the person that was acquired by trade this offseason, and that's James Paxton. I think both have great stuff. My pick, Luis Severino. He's young, high velocity on the fastball, nasty slider. And I think this postseason, even though we didn't go as far this year, was a big test for him. And especially that wild card game where last year he pitched a third of an inning and was taken out. This year he dominated that game. So in my eyes, even though we didn't go as far, he kind of like passed I'll say my midterm of what it takes to be your number one starter, and I think obviously with another offseason to get better, I think he'll be your number one starter.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think that if I was a betting man, I think I would bet on Severino. But I think another thing to think about when you're talking about MLB rotations is kind of the dynamic and the composition of yours. So Yankees currently, we think they're going to have 5 starting pitchers. Severino, Paxton, Happ, Tanaka, and Sabathia. 3 of those are lefty. So it actually might make more sense to have Paxton be your 1, Sevy 2, Happ 3, Tanaka 4, and Sabathia 5 to go left, right, left, right, left. But then you have the rollover, and then it's 2 lefties in a row. So it doesn't matter as much, but having that variety, I think it's really important that Paxton and Happ don't pitch back and back.
That's fair. That's a fair point, definitely, for sure.
So I don't know. I wouldn't like Paxton 2, Happ 3. But we don't know if they think Tanaka's 3. But I just know Paxton and Happ are 2 similar pitchers for me to have them be back-to-back. So if their idea is Happ and Severino being 2-3, that's fine. Just don't have Paxton and Happ back-to-back. But I think, like you said, Severino's...
All right, you're locking in for Sevy, though?
I think that's...
All right, as much as we can, we're both locking in for Sevy, I guess. So with that, it is time for final thoughts. Dan, you want me to go first because you didn't have one? Do you still not have one?
I will let you go first.
Okay, I will go first then. I think we got to give a huge shout out to another Deke, and that is John Collins. He is going to be participating in the NBA dunk contest. Really exciting because the All-Star Weekend is in Charlotte. Still don't think we can afford tickets to that. So hopefully we're going to Fan Fest. They have that's free. And it's in Epicenter, Charlotte, which is definitely a really fun place to be. I know I was there for the Belt Bowl, and hopefully you can tag along. But so that's what I'm really looking forward to. I think it's great publicity for John Collins. I think beyond just having a ton of great dunks in his first 2 years in the NBA, I think he's really developed into someone that can shoot beyond the paint.
Yeah.
His 3 points developed some too. He's had a lot of double-doubles, and all this year I've been hearing about new career highs in points. So I think this is great publicity for John Collins, and hopefully the rest of the Atlanta Hawks team can follow his lead and get better too, because he needs it.
Yeah, and with John Collins, he's super underrated. Right
Very
now,
underrated. I think he's the most underrated pick of that draft class.
Yeah, I think you pretty much have to agree, especially with where he was in the draft. Hawks clearly liked him, but he doesn't get that respect around the league, and I don't think a lot of people know his name because Atlanta kind of isn't great right now. But hopefully the dunk contest will be where he can kind of be like, hey, I'm John Collins, world.
What's up?
Yeah.
Here I am.
Yeah.
Take it or leave it.
Yeah, I'm with it. I'm going to go more towards the soccer realm of things.
Oh, I didn't know you liked soccer.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, I like soccer. So the most interesting thing for me right now is the top 4 in the Premier League is heating up. We have Liverpool on 57 points, Man City on 53, Tottenham on 48, Chelsea at 47, Arsenal, Man United are tied at 41. Which sounds like there's a pretty big gap there. That's 6 points, but weeks ago Man United were 12 points out. So
right.
They're cutting that gap very well. And you look at it, Liverpool and Man City are locks. But this weekend you have a Chelsea-Arsenal matchup.
Ooh,
and
even I know that's exciting.
That's a big game, because if Arsenal can win, that cuts the gap to 3 points.
Mm-hmm.
And 3 points is nothing when you still have half the season to go. So I look at that matchup this weekend, and I think it's going to be a draw. So I think it'll close the gap. Man United are sneaking up in there with their new manager, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. So they're playing at Brighton, so I think there's a good chance they win. I mean, I think it's going to be a 5-point gap by the end of the weekend, which is that's very, very good. I mean, that's a competitive league. So look out for that game this weekend, and we'll see how the top 4 finishes.
Okay, awesome. So, Dan, you still haven't technically done a show live, but this is the first show we've done in person, so how do you think you did?
I think it went well.
I think it went well too. I think we did a great job. I don't want to speak too high on ourselves, but as far as shows go, I think it was a good show. Anyway, so next week though, it's the 27th. We will be live.
We'll be live.
We're live, baby. Anyway, and we are going to be with a very special guest, and I'm going to announce that right now because I can. And that is Nate Gillum, offensive lineman, a guard for Wake Forest. So he's injuries kind of played around a little bit on the offensive line. A good friend of mine that I met last summer in the summer management program at the business school. Really great guy, can definitely get some great insight into quarterbacks, the running backs, and really
Great.
All that happened last season and all that should happen this season. So enough speculation. We'll have to see what the man himself says. So thanks everybody for watching on Facebook, and this will be uploaded on YouTube for all of our Twitter followers to see. And then anyone listening to the recording, thanks for listening on Wake Radio. We appreciate all the support. Any other questions that you might have, we'd love to answer them. That is also on our Facebook and Twitter page, so make sure to submit your questions and we'll answer them. We answered all 3 so far.
Yeah,
So
submit your questions. We like them.
we got 100% on completion. We'll have to see if we get the same grade in terms of quality of answers.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks everybody, and as always, go Deeks!
Yeah, go Deeks!